The morning mist hovered over the aircraft carrier like a ghostly veil, tendrils of fog curling around the steel deck, slick with dew and the faint residue of spent fuel, and the hum of idling engines cut through the chill with a low, vibrating warning, signaling that something extraordinary was about to unfold. Pilots in their flight suits paced nervously, helmets clutched in white-knuckled hands, eyes darting to the endless horizon where sky met sea in a seamless, deceptive calm. A calm that belied the violent chaos these men had been trained to orchestrate. And as the first F-6F Hellcats, Corsairs, and dauntless dive bombers roared to life, the deck seemed to shudder beneath the collective heartbeat of adrenaline and anticipation, a rhythm almost tangible, as if the carrier itself knew it was about to witness a revolution in naval aviation, one that would challenge everything the men knew about takeoffs, landings, and the precise orchestration of death and survival above open water. The commander's voice crackled over the intercom, calm yet brittle, instructing pilots to prepare for a maneuver so counterintuitive, so audacious, that the uninitiated would have dismissed it as suicide. And yet, every man here understood the stakes, the difference between innovation and catastrophe, between doubling strike efficiency or seeing aircraft lost to the unforgiving ocean below. As the first pilot taxied to the arresting wires, the wind whipping across the flight deck, lifting raindrops into sharp, icy needles, he felt the aircraft respond like a living thing, the tail flexing under the subtle pressure of anticipation, a precise ballet of metal, air, and raw courage. And as he aligned the plane, the concept of backwards landing crystallized in his mind. A series of calculated risks designed to exploit physics and aerodynamics in a way that defied conventional wisdom, a method born from necessity, from months of trial and error, from observing the subtle inconsistencies of wind, carrier movement, and weight distribution, from countless simulations and heated debates in dimly lit briefing rooms where charts, chalk, and models had been dissected, until the engineers' and pilots' eyes burned with the knowledge that the solution was as simple as it was deadly. Approach the deck in a reversed glide, tail first at precisely the correct angle, allowing the aircraft to arrest its descent with maximum efficiency while minimizing the chance of overshoot, a maneuver that, if executed correctly, would double strike capacity without sacrificing a single man. And as he initiated the descent, the carrier itself seemed to align with the plane, steel deck vibrating under invisible pressure, the arresting wires stretching taut like nerves straining for impact and for a suspended heartbeat. Everything slowed. The ocean's waves, the distant horizon, the roar of engines, as if time itself were holding its breath to witness this audacious defiance of expectation. The first touchdown was like a collision with destiny, the tailhook catching the wire in a metallic scream that echoed across the deck, a sound simultaneously violent and triumphant. And the pilots watched in awe as the aircraft slowed with elegant precision, wings trembling with absorbed kinetic energy, the metal fuselage quivering like a living organism acknowledging mastery over the elements. And in that moment, fear transformed into exhilaration, doubt into respect, and the carrier crew erupted into a muted, disciplined applause, understanding that they had just witnessed the birth of a method that would reshape naval aviation and secure supremacy in the Pacific theater, a method that turned the laws of physics into allies and enemy expectations into irrelevance. As the second, third, and subsequent aircraft repeated the maneuver flawlessly, each landing reinforcing the revelation that this backwards approach was not madness but genius, a combination of intuition, engineering, and courage converging in a single fluid motion that transformed risk into efficiency. The wind picked up, slicing across the deck, carrying the scent of salt, jet fuel, and anticipation, and the men knew that this innovation would ripple across every carrier, every squadron, every mission from that day forward, changing strategies, tactics, and the very definition of operational effectiveness. And as the last aircraft came to a halt, engines winding down, The sun broke through clouds tinged with gold and crimson, reflecting off the metal hulls like a silent benediction. The pilots removed their helmets, faces glistening with sweat, eyes gleaming with disbelief and triumph, understanding that they had glimpsed a new paradigm of aerial warfare, where courage alone was insufficient, and where innovation, precision, and a willingness to defy the obvious could multiply power and survival. And as the officers gathered for debriefing, charts sprawled across tables, models meticulously aligned, calculations scribbled in ink and chalk. The story of this maneuver began to take shape, one that would be studied for decades, analyzed, refined, and eventually taught to generations of aviators, a testament to the audacity of men who challenged convention, harnessed physics, and redefined the impossible, all while balancing the fine line between triumph and disaster, their legacy etched not only in flight logs, but in the very fabric of naval history, where every arresting wire, every tailhook, and every deck landing would forever carry the imprint of this daring breakthrough. And in the final suspenseful heartbeat, as the last waves lapped against the carrier hull and the horizon blazed with the promise of another day, the pilots and crew alike understood the truth, that mastery over the skies required more than training, more than firepower. It demanded vision, courage, and the audacity to land backward into the future. The carrier deck seemed alive under the rising sun, each steel panel glinting like a knife edge, slick with the early morning mist, while the wake of the ship sliced through the ocean in a relentless rhythm, a silent accompaniment to the distant roar of engines that would soon test the limits of men and machines alike. And as the pilots prepared for the next series of trials, their eyes scanned the horizon, where sea and sky merged in a deceptive calm, unaware that every gust of wind, every subtle swell of water, and every micro-vibration in the carrier's structure would be scrutinized, measured, and used to perfect the audacious technique that allowed aircraft to land tail first with astonishing efficiency, a method that required not just skill but intimate knowledge of the machine, of aerodynamics, and of the ocean itself. And as the first plane began its approach, the tailhook glinting like a predator's claw, the deck crew held their collective breath, knowing that success depended on a precise alignment, a harmony of forces that, if even slightly misjudged, could spell disaster. Yet the pilot remained calm, trusting the instincts honed over countless hours in simulators, in wind tunnels, and on test flights where every maneuver, every angle, every decision had been refined to near perfection. The plane descended in a controlled glide, wings flexing against the unseen pressures of air and gravity, tail poised for the arresting wire that would absorb its momentum and bring it to a halt in mere seconds. A ballet of metal and energy that left no margin for error. And the crew observed as the tailhook engaged with a metallic scream that resonated through the steel deck, the sound echoing over the ocean like the roar of a victorious predator. While below, the ship pitched slightly with the impact, distributing energy through its vast frame, yet the aircraft remained steady, a testament to engineering precision and pilot mastery. And as the Mustang's wheels kissed the deck in perfect alignment, the men exhaled as one, the tension dissipating into a collective recognition that the backward landing was more than a stunt. It was a revolution in naval aviation, multiplying strike potential without additional aircraft, without additional resources, purely through innovation and daring, a concept that would soon be taught to every squadron, every pilot, every future carrier-bound aviator who would inherit the skies and decks where victory was measured not only by the bombs dropped, but by the efficiency and safety of every landing. The next planes followed, each approach smoother than the last, a symphony of movement and precision, engines humming, air slicing through propellers, wings flexing like living appendages, the pilot's eyes sharp for even the smallest deviation, the crew ready to act instantly. And in each successful landing, the message became undeniable. Physics could be harnessed, fear could be mastered, and the edge of possibility could be pushed further than anyone dared imagine. And as the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the carrier deck, every pilot and crew member felt the surge of accomplishment and awe, the realization that they were witnessing the birth of a new standard in warfare, one where ingenuity and courage eclipsed brute force, and that the lessons learned today would echo through every carrier strike for decades to come, reshaping tactics, strategy, and the very fabric of aerial naval operations, while the distant horizon promised more trials, more flights, and more opportunities to perfect the technique that had already proven transformative, leaving the men to understand, in that suspended, breathtaking moment, that they were part of history, etching a story of audacity, skill, and innovation into the endless canvas of sky and sea. A story that would be whispered among aviators and commanders alike for generations. A story that began with a backward landing and ended in a revolution of precision and power. The deck of the carrier vibrated with anticipation, a low hum of machinery, engines, and the sea itself, as if the entire ship were holding its breath in recognition of what was about to unfold. And the pilots, strapped into their planes, felt the subtle tension of history pressing down on their shoulders, knowing that each takeoff and backward landing would not only test their skill, but redefine what naval aviation could achieve. The sun glinted off polished wings, casting fragmented light across steel and water, highlighting every curve, every rivet, every line of engineering that had been painstakingly crafted to withstand the violent ballet of carrier operations. And as the first plane taxied into position, the tailhook lowered with deliberate precision, catching the reflection of sunlight and sea spray in its cold, metallic edge, a harbinger of the performance about to be demonstrated. And when the engines roared to life, the vibration rippled through the deck, a wave of anticipation that reached every crewman and pilot, binding them into a singular purpose of focus, technique, and trust in the impossible physics they had come to master. The aircraft accelerating with a controlled ferocity, wings flexing against turbulent air, each a living instrument responding to the hands of the pilot, to the invisible currents of wind and the minute motions of the carrier beneath. And as the plane neared the threshold of the deck, the approach was calculated to the millisecond. The pitch, yaw, and roll harmonized with the motion of the ship, while below, the arresting wires gleamed like threads of steel lightning, waiting to snatch the aircraft from the sky with precision unmatched by anything on land. And when the tailhook engaged, the screech of metal tearing against tension echoed over the waves, reverberating through hull and hull crew alike, a signal of mastery and proof of concept. Yet the magic lay in what followed. The plane did not merely stop. It balanced. It distributed momentum. It seemed to float on invisible currents, harnessing the energy of motion to emerge steady, unshaken, ready for the next maneuver, and with each subsequent landing, the crew and pilots refined the technique further. Micro-adjustments honed by countless flights, subtle gestures of throttle and stick, the flex of wings and control surfaces working in perfect unison. A demonstration that the backward landing was no accident, but the culmination of engineering insight, rigorous experimentation, and human audacity. A method that tripled efficiency, preserved aircraft and lives, and redefined the tactical calculus of naval engagements, all while the sun climbed higher, catching every glint of metal and propeller, painting a living canvas of power, precision, and discipline. The water below churning with the passage of the ship, the ocean a silent witness to the ballet above. And in that moment, every pilot understood the delicate balance of courage, trust, and technical mastery, that they were dancing on the razor's edge of possibility, and each backward landing became a statement, a declaration that human ingenuity, when paired with daring, could bend the very rules of war, mastering what was once thought impossible, and leaving a legacy that would echo through generations of naval aviators, the horizon stretching endlessly ahead, promising more flights, more innovations, more opportunities to push the limits of air power and carrier strike efficiency, each successful landing a beat in the heart of history, each takeoff a pulse of courage and vision, all woven into a continuous story of precision, skill, and unstoppable momentum, where every breath, Every flex of metal, every calculated motion mattered. A symphony of mechanics and human resolve that would define modern naval aviation forever. The afternoon sun blazed over the endless expanse of the Pacific, reflecting off the carrier's slick steel deck, the waves below glittering like shattered glass, and the pilots, strapped into their cockpits, felt the weight of every second, every calculation, every previous takeoff and landing they had mastered, knowing that this moment was more than just practice. It was evolution in motion, a ballet of physics, nerve, and ingenuity. The aircraft lined up for approach, engines whining, the air vibrating with energy, and as the lead plane moved forward, every roll of the throttle, every subtle angle of a wing, every minute deflection of the rudder had been rehearsed countless times in simulators, test runs, and in the minds of men who had mapped the air currents above the carrier down to fractions of a second. And as the plane descended toward the deck, the horizon tilting slightly, the wind shearing unpredictably across the bow, the pilot's hands danced over the controls with delicate force, responding to the rhythm of the carrier's motion like a conductor directing a symphony, while below the deck crew tensed, watching each movement, ready to adjust arresting wires, guide aircraft, and ensure that nothing would break this fragile choreography. And the first hook engaged, pulling the plane from motion with a sharp, metallic scream that seemed to cleave the air itself, a sound that reverberated across the deck and the surrounding sea, announcing mastery over chaos. And yet the true wonder lay in what followed. The aircraft, instead of halting abruptly, floated, pivoted slightly backward as intended, using momentum and aerodynamic lift to glide into a perfect stop, the wings absorbing gusts and turbulence, the fuselage flexing just enough to disperse stress without a creak. A live testament to engineering foresight, and as the next plane lined up, every adjustment refined the method further. Microseconds of reaction, subtle joystick movements, tailhook angles, thrust modulation, each contributing to a seamless landing that had once been deemed impossible. And in those minutes, the pilots realized the genius of the technique. It didn't just stop the aircraft. It enhanced carrier strike capability, reduced downtime, and allowed for faster rotations, meaning more sorties, more firepower, more lives saved, all achieved by embracing what seemed counterintuitive, landing backwards, trusting the unseen forces of aerodynamics and momentum. And the carrier itself became an extension of the pilot's senses, vibrating and responding as if alive, guiding the planes to safety, orchestrating a perfect rhythm of landing, recovery and relaunch while the ocean whispered below, the spray catching sunlight in fleeting diamonds as if approving this dance of men, machines, and ingenuity. And with each landing, each pilot's confidence grew, knowing that they were redefining naval aviation, demonstrating that courage, intellect, and rigorous practice could turn even the most audacious maneuvers into routine, reliable operations, that the impossible was now habitual, and that the future of carrier warfare was no longer limited by convention, fear, or physics, but only by imagination, skill, and the relentless pursuit of perfection in a world where speed, precision, and ingenuity decided the fate of battles and the survival of fleets. Each successful landing a pulse in the heart of modern naval aviation, each takeoff a declaration of mastery, and every backward landing a story of human innovation carving its mark across the sky and the sea. As the sun sank lower toward the horizon, painting the Pacific in molten gold and crimson, the carrier deck became a stage of orchestrated precision, a theater where every pilot, every aircraft, and every deck crew member moved in a rhythm dictated by skill, trust, and innovation. The planes lined up in sequence, engines thrumming, propellers slicing the air into invisible ribbons, each pilot's mind attuned to the subtle shifts of wind, the sway of the ship, the pressure of the controls beneath gloved hands. And as the first aircraft began its approach, it felt less like a landing and more like a conversation between man, machine, and the sea itself. A delicate negotiation of forces that, until recently, had been considered too risky to attempt. Yet here they were, descending backward, harnessing momentum, aerodynamics, and split-second judgment to achieve what once defied logic. And with every successful touchdown, confidence multiplied, as if each plane carried not just ordnance and pilots, but proof that human ingenuity could rewrite the rules of warfare that the carrier was no longer a flat steel deck but a living instrument of precision, capable of producing twice the strike output without adding more aircraft pilots or risk. Every hook engaged, every wire stretched taut, every wing flexed to disperse energy, and in the midst of this kinetic ballet, the pilots glimpsed the larger implications. Backward landings didn't just preserve aircraft and lives, they reshaped strategy, enabling carriers to launch relentless waves of strikes, sustain prolonged operations, and outmaneuver any adversary daring to challenge American naval supremacy. And yet, amidst this technical mastery, there was an unspoken tension, a subtle hum of suspense, for the technique demanded absolute concentration, trust in the laws of physics, and unwavering faith in one's training. For a single miscalculation could transform brilliance into disaster, and every pilot felt the weight of that reality as their aircraft descended, glided, and reversed onto the deck with near magical precision, wings whispering against the air, landing gear absorbing forces, engines throttling for balance, and in that moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The sun's dying rays glittering off metal, water, and the faces of men who had learned to embrace the impossible. And as the planes came to rest, engines winding down, propellers slowing, the deck crew exhaled collectively, their hands still poised, ready for the next cycle. Aware that this innovation, backward landing, had just doubled the combat effectiveness of the carrier, transforming naval aviation into a continuous pulse of firepower, readiness, and resilience. A testament to what happens when courage, intellect, and experimentation converge in the heat of war, leaving behind a legacy of awe, efficiency, and unshakable dominance across the vast, unforgiving Pacific. The final twilight settled over the carrier deck, casting long shadows across the steel and the restless sea, the air heavy with salt, oil, and anticipation. Pilots lined up their aircraft one last time, engines thrumming in unison, a chorus of controlled power vibrating through the deck, as if the ship itself was alive, aware that this moment would define everything they had learned and achieved. Each plane approached backward, a maneuver that had once been deemed reckless, impossible, or simply too daring to attempt, yet now unfolded with a rhythm born of countless hours of trial, observation, and unwavering trust in both technology and training. The wings sliced the air with precision, every landing gear shock absorbed, every angle of descent calculated down to fractions of a second. The deck crew moving in silent synchrony, ready to catch the aircraft and prepare it for the next sortie. The ocean around them shimmered like molten silver, reflecting the fire of the setting sun and the gleam of the planes, each landing a heartbeat in the larger pulse of naval power. Pilots felt the tension and exhilaration intertwine. Backward landings were no longer a risk, but a statement. Control, mastery, and human ingenuity could bend the unpredictable elements of nature and war itself. As the final aircraft rolled to a stop, engines winding down, propellers slowing, a hush fell over the deck, punctuated only by the soft hiss of hydraulics and the creak of metal settling into place. The men stepped back, their eyes tracing the arcs and lines of each wing, the contours of the fuselage, and the invisible traces of air and motion left behind in the descent. In that silence, the true impact of backward landing became clear. It was not just a technique, but a revolution, doubling strike capability, preserving precious aircraft, safeguarding pilots, and fundamentally altering the calculus of carrier-based warfare. From now on, every launch and recovery would carry the echoes of this ingenuity. Every battle would be informed by the lessons of trust, courage, and calculated audacity. In the fading light, veterans and new pilots alike shared nods and quiet acknowledgments, the pride of mastering the impossible mingling with the weight of responsibility that came with such power. Each backward landing, each precise touchdown, had been a message to the world, to adversaries and allies alike, that the U.S. Navy could innovate under pressure, adapt in real time, and convert daring ideas into operational supremacy. The deck, now calm, reflected the glow of a war fought not just with bullets and bombs, but with intellect, precision, and relentless experimentation. The suspense of every prior flight, every risky maneuver had culminated here. Backward landing was no longer theory. It was legend, a symbol of ingenuity meeting necessity. and a haunting, inspiring echo across the oceans that would guide generations of naval aviators long after the engines had cooled and the carriers sailed into history.